Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Austria, the government is planning to create a criminal offence called political Islam, raising fears of collective punishment and rising Islamophobia. Chancellor Sebastian Kurz said this after a cabinet meeting which agreed to adopt strict measures in the wake of the Vienna attack last week. The proposals include the ability to close mosques and strip suspects of citizenship. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India is a threat to the entire region due to its belligerent actions. Speaking to Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation over the phone, Qureshi said India is forcibly trying to convert the Muslim majority into a minority in occupied Kashmir. He also said the rising Islamophobic incidents in Europe are hurting sentiments of Muslims. In Egypt, 7 members of a peacekeeping force have been killed when a helicopter crashed in the southern Sinai Peninsula. 5 Americans, 1 French and an Israeli national are among those killed. An investigation has been launched to determine the cause of the crash. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now to the news in detail. The Austrian government is planning to create a criminal offence called political Islam, raising fears of collective punishment and rising Islamophobia. Chancellor Sebastian Kurz said this after a meeting of the cabinet which agreed to adopt strict measures in the wake of the Vienna attack last week that left 4 people dead and 20 wounded. The proposals include the ability to close mosques, strip suspects of citizenship and preventive detentions. Kurz's party has previously criticized the concept of preventive detentions while in the opposition. The measures will be brought before the parliament in December for a vote. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India is a threat to the entire region due to its belligerent actions. Qureshi said this while speaking to the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation over the phone. The Foreign Minister said India is forcibly trying to convert the Muslim majority into a minority in occupied Kashmir. He lauded the bloc's statements condemning Indian atrocities in the occupied valley. Qureshi also said the rising Islamophobic incidents in Europe are hurting sentiments of Muslims. He stressed the need for collective efforts to combat the scourge of Islamophobia. Earlier, Pakistan's Foreign Office summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register protest over ceasefire violations along the line of control. In the Netherlands, several shots have been fired at the Saudi embassy in The Hague. Police say no one is hurt in the attack. They say the motive for the shooting is not known yet. The area has been sealed and an investigation is underway. In recent weeks, Europe has witnessed a surge in Islamophobic attacks after French President Emmanuel Macron's anti-Islam remarks. Saudi Arabia has urged the world to take a decisive stance against Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. In a statement, King Salman bin Abdulaziz said Riyadh will keep supporting Yemenis until they restore sovereignty from Iranian hegemony. The king said Iran's regional projects and interference in other countries poses great danger to the world. He said the international community should guarantee a drastic handling of Iran's efforts to obtain weapons of mass destruction. King Salman also condemned the Iran-aligned Houthis movement's deliberate targeting of civilians inside Saudi Arabia via drones. Meanwhile, he said the kingdom supports efforts to bring peace to the Middle East through negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis. Afghanistan ambassador to Pakistan Najibullah Ali Khail has met Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Islamabad. In a tweet, Pakistan's military media wing said the two sides discussed the regional security situation. The Army Chief lauded the services of the Afghan ambassador in promoting bilateral ties. The two dignitaries also discussed the Afghan peace process and issues pertaining to border management. Earlier, a 22-member Afghan delegation met Pakistan's trade and commerce officials at Torkham border. The two sides urged the higher authorities to remove hurdles in bilateral trade. In Egypt, 7 members of a US-led peacekeeping force have been killed when a helicopter crashed in the southern Sinai Peninsula. 5 Americans, 1 French and an Israeli national are among those killed. According to the coalition force, the aircraft was on a reconnaissance mission when it crashed. An investigation has been launched to determine the cause of the crash. The United Nations says Libya's voting sides have agreed to hold elections within 18 months in a major breakthrough. This comes as 75 Libyan participants chosen by the UN have been meeting in Tunis for political talks since Monday. In a news conference, UN's acting Libya envoy says the preliminary agreement focuses on a roadmap to free, fair and inclusive elections. Stephanie Williams said the roadmap will also include steps to unite institutions. The political dialogue will continue today, focusing on making a unified transition government.
Roadmap also outlines steps for uniting Libya's institutions, restoring public services, and to begin a very important process of national reconciliation and transitional justice, and to quickly address the issue of those displaced inside and outside of Libya.
In Armenia, 10 leading opposition figures have been arrested for protesting against a ceasefire deal with Azerbaijan. The pact secures Azerbaijan's territorial gains after 6 weeks of fighting over Nagorno-Karabakh. Prosecutors say the politicians could face up to a 10-year jail term for their role in violent protests. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan is facing growing pressure to step down, but he has refused to do so. Meanwhile, a no-fly zone has been declared in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh except for military movement. The fighting had left more than 1,400 people dead and forced thousands to flee their homes. Kyrgyz Prime Minister Sadir Japarov says he will step down as acting president in order to run in the January 10th presidential election. Addressing the media, he said Parliamentary Speaker Talant Memitov will constitutionally take over as acting head of the state. Japarov had previously promised not to run in the coming presidential elections. The country's constitution also does not allow caretaker leaders to run in the presidential election. Japarov declared himself as the acting president of the country hours after Suranbay Jeenbekov resigned as president on October 15 amid protests in Bishkek. Australia has appointed a special investigator to prosecute alleged war crimes committed by special forces in Afghanistan. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said there were a significant number of incidents and issues to look into. Morrison warned that the process of complex investigation will require Australia to deal with honest and brutal truths. Morrison said the chief investigator will address the criminal matters made in the Inspector General's report.
This is a relationship that he understands very deeply based on his broad experience over a long period of time in the United States, and he's engaged in, of course, as Vice President and his many other roles. And I was also had the opportunity to personally extend that invitation for him and Dr. Biden to join us next year as part of the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the Indus relationship.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the western part of Tigray region has been liberated in a military offensive. Abiy said the army is providing humanitarian assistance and services in the liberated areas. The Ethiopian Prime Minister also accused his foes of atrocities during a week of fighting. He added the national military has found bodies of its members who were tied and shot in Tigray. State media says Parliament has removed immunity from prosecution for 39 members, including Tigray's president. Meanwhile, the UN stated aid agencies are unable to restock food and other emergency supplies in Tigray due to lack of access. The UN Refugee Agency said negotiations are underway with both the sides for humanitarian corridors to be opened. In the first calls with Joe Biden since the US presidential elections, Japan, South Korea and Australia reaffirmed plans to tackle issues including climate change and regional security. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga quoted Biden as saying he looks forward to strengthening the US-Japan alliance. He said Biden wanted to work together for a free and open Indo-Pacific. In Seoul, President Moon Jae-in's office said Biden reaffirmed the US commitment to defend South Korea. Moon's spokesperson said he asked Biden for close cooperation for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison said he spoke with Biden about emission reduction technology. Russia has accused Ukraine of violating an agreement on opening new crossing points in the Donbass region. After a video conference of the contact group, Russian envoy Boris Gryzlov said Kiev promised peace before an election, but he said Ukraine resumes shelling and armed provocations in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions once its elections are over. However, Ukraine announced the opening of the checkpoints on November the 10th. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The United States has recorded over 1,500 COVID-19 deaths and more than 145,000 cases overnight. The global number of COVID-19 infections has topped 52 million with over 1.28 million deaths. More in this report.
As countries scramble to strike deals with the promising vaccine candidates, COVID-19 continues to claim thousands of lives every day. The powerful second wave of the fatal virus is making the already grim situation in North and South America even worse. The spread of the pandemic in Latin America's worst-hit country, Brazil, is worsening with the death rate rising steeply. In Argentina, President Alberto Fernandez and several of his ministers are now in preventative isolation after coming in contact with an infected official. Meanwhile, new restrictions have been imposed in the U.S. state of New York as Christmas approaches.
We expect COVID to spike dramatically over the next 30 days to 60 days, right into Christmas, and this is going to be a big damper on the economy, right in a period of time where people really want to spend time with their families and spend money on gifts. And so the timing is horrible to have this. So we're really not, I really want to be a bull. Honestly, I'm feeling like I want to be a bull, but I think I'm going to have to wait till next year. I want to see an inauguration, and I want to see a strategy to defeat coronavirus.
The situation in Europe continues to deteriorate, with Italy now among the top 10 worst-hit countries, while the UK has joined the unfortunate list of states with over 50,000 deaths. Spain has started mandatory mass testing amid an aggressive spread of the virus, but the majority hit by economic fallout of the coronavirus have their reservations over the government's decision.
I think this is clearly good, but I think it would be interesting if people could choose if they want to get tested or not, because there may be people who need to do it immediately and don't have the money to pay for it.
In Asia, India continues to be ravaged by the disease as it recorded nearly 48,000 cases and 550 deaths overnight. Meanwhile, Iran has imposed new COVID-19 restrictions, battling record rise in deaths and cases.
In Pakistan, 34 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 7,055. The Health Ministry says 1,808 people have tested positive for the disease overnight. The ministry said there are over 22,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of nearly 350,000 countrywide cases, more than 320,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 152,000 cases have been detected in Sindh province, while Punjab has reported over 108,000 cases. In the capital Islamabad, over 22,000 people have been infected so far. Southeast Asian leaders are meeting virtually with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang for the 37th ASEAN Summit. Vietnam's Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc presided over the opening ceremony. Secretary General of ASEAN Dato Lim Jock Hoi said Vietnam has contributed to cohesiveness in the region. Speaking at the summit, Premier Li Keqiang said China and ASEAN have been fighting coronavirus together and facilitating economic recovery. Russia says post-registration trials of its Sputnik V coronavirus vaccine have shown no new side effects on health. In an interview, Gamaleya Scientific Research Institute Director Alexander Ginsberg said 80% of the vaccinated people have no side effects and only 15 to 17% develop side effects. He said potential side effects include a low-grade fever for 2 days, redness at injection site, headache, and muscle discomfort. Earlier, Russian Health Ministry said data indicates that Sputnik vaccines are capable of creating long-term immunity for up to 2 years. Russia is the first country to register for a coronavirus vaccine and aims for mass production after complete trials. Bahrain's Crown Prince Salman Al Khalifa has taken over as the new Prime Minister of the country. This comes after Bahrain's long-serving Prime Minister Sheikh Khalifa bin Salman Al Khalifa died yesterday at the age of 84. Crown Prince Salman is part of a younger generation of Gulf rulers seen as pushing social and economic reforms. Sheikh Khalifa had repeatedly put down opposition unrest during half-century in power. He was the world's longest-serving prime minister who held the post since Bahrain's independence in 1971. The Al Khalifa family is reigning Bahrain since 1783. In the Philippines, at least one person has died and 3 others are missing after Typhoon VAMCO paralyzed parts of the capital, Manila. Residents await rescue by boat due to rising floodwaters. VAMCO is the 21st cyclone to hit the Philippines this year. The nation is still reeling from Goni, the most powerful storm this year. VAMCO sustained winds of 130 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 215 kilometers per hour across Luzon Island. Officials say 40,000 homes have been either fully or partially submerged in the area. VAMCO is expected to head towards Vietnam. In the U.S., tropical storm Eta has spun towards Florida's west coast, nearing its 4th landfall in a matter of days. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis had declared a state of emergency in 13 counties due to the surging threats. The National Hurricane Center says the storm is traveling with sustained winds of up to 70 miles per hour. National Weather Service have forecast heavy rainfall, storm surge, and possible tornadoes on the west coast of Florida. State's governor has requested Federal Emergency Management Agency to declare a pre-landfall state of emergency to mobilize resources. Swathes of Mexico's state of Tabasco have been underwater days after Storm Eta left the region flooded. Locals in Tabasco accuse authorities of providing no support for the storm victims. The streets of the city of Villahermosa resemble the canals of Venice as floodwaters after Storm Eta have yet to subside. Locals are using small boats and they have to climb ladders to reach the second stories of their homes to escape the floodwaters. People say they are reluctant to go to the government-sponsored shelters due to the COVID-19 threat. Brazilian artist Jorge Rores has a new canvas amid the coronavirus pandemic. He's painting on the face masks for those wanting to make an impression while still remaining covered. More in this report.
Jorge Rores is known locally for recreating the magical world of Rio de Janeiro's carnival with its colorful costumes and fantastic floats on his works of art. Now, in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, he is using his art to make masks that don't attempt to hide but rather accentuate the features of the wearer. Rores paints face masks that are so accurate as to be uncanny.
Uma resposta muito boa.
I've had a really positive reaction. People laugh. Something that was meant to be sad became something that brings joy. They have found them funny and quirky. I had that response and suddenly people started to look for me to create a mask for them. I made this one for my colleague and since then I have not stopped making them.
As Rory speaks wearing his mask, his mouth, like that of a ventriloquist, does not appear to move. He does it by painting the person's lower face onto a white mask, taking time to the details like skin hue and lips.
Vital that people look after themselves. It's good that people use masks. I use this mask in order not to lose my identity.
The masks have become popular with people who don't want to hide their face during the pandemic but are keen to protect themselves against the virus.
An extremely rare purple pink diamond is sold for over $26 million at Sotheby's in Geneva. The oval stone, dubbed as the spirit of the rose, weighs 14.83 carats. Sotheby's says the rough diamond was called Nijinsky in honor of the Russian-Polish ballet dancer and choreographer. It was mined by the Russian diamond producer Alrosa in July 2017. It took around a year of painstaking work to cut the finished diamond to shape while preserving its pink color. The name of the winning bidder has not been publicly disclosed. Naturally colored stones have been greatly valued as an asset by the super rich in recent years rather than white stone. South African researchers plan to release scores of hand-reared penguin chicks at the Western Cape de Hoop Nature Reserve. This is to be done in order to boost efforts to start a new breeding colony of the seabirds at risk of extinction. More in this package.
African penguins have been sliding towards extinction since industrial fishing started around the Cape. The population has plunged to around 13,000 breeding pairs last year, compared to 1 million pairs in the 1920s when their eggs started to be harvested for human consumption. In January 2019, researchers deployed dummy penguins that emit the distinctive call of the birds, but success has been limited.
This has never been done for the African penguin. It's been done for other seabird species around the world. Possibly the most successful and famous example is the Atlantic puffin off the east coast of the US. They also used decoys and releasing chicks at the site, and they eventually got a very big thriving colony.
Researchers now plan to release around 50 juvenile birds each year for several years, starting in early 2021. This will be done to try to establish a breeding colony at De Hoop.
What we've learned from the other projects around the world is that you want to try and release as many chicks at the site as possible and over a long period of time. So we would ideally want to try and release at least 50 juveniles a year over a period of 3 to 5 years.
The decline of African penguin populations has been attributed to dwindling fish stocks, including anchovies and sardines. It has also been worsened by climate change.
The 54th Annual Country Music Association Awards were presented in the U.S. city of Nashville. The show featured live performances from several of the nominees. More in this report.
It's time to pull out those cowboy boots, for country music's biggest night just wrapped up in Nashville. Reba McEntire and Darius Rucker hosted the 2020 Country Music Association Awards. While it was a big night for Maren Morris, as she picked up 3 awards, including the coveted Female Vocalist of the Year.
There are so many amazing Black women that pioneered and continue to pioneer this genre, and I know they're going to come after me. They've come before me, but you've made this genre so beautiful. I hope you know that we see you. Thank you for making me so inspired as a singer in this genre.
This year's Willie Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award went to Charlie Pride, who has been making country music since the 1950s, while Luke Combs was the only other multi-award winner of the night.
I don't deserve this any more than anybody else in this category. Especially this year has been so crazy, and I know everybody in this category worked their ass off. Thomas, Eric, everybody watching. I'm just lucky. I'm a lucky guy, and thank God for what you do for me, and thank you to the fans for what you do for me.
Best Vocal Duo winners Dan and Shay were joined by Justin Bieber in California's Hollywood Bowl to perform their collaboration 10,000 Hours. And Keith Urban entertained crowds from Australia with a performance of God Whispered Your Name.
Talk about being safe. But suddenly I want to live.
India has entered an unprecedented recession as the country's economy contracted for a second straight quarter. The meltdown is due to the coronavirus pandemic and the subsequent economic slowdown. In its latest report, the Reserve Bank of India said the country's gross domestic product shrank 8.6% in the third quarter. The central bank also hinted at the high inflation in the coming months. A sharp rise in the coronavirus infections can put extra stress on already struggling households and corporations. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi said India entered a recession because of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's policies. Alibaba sales for its post-COVID-19 Singles Day shopping extravaganza hit $74 billion, the world's biggest sales event, eclipsing Black Friday and Cyber Monday in the United States, spanned for 4 days this year. Alibaba set primary discount days for November 1 through November 3, as well as the usual November 11. The e-commerce giant said lockdown-weary consumers splashed out on as many as 16 million discounted goods. Such is its size that its performance is widely considered indicative of China's post-virus economic recovery. The haul was overshadowed by a 10% drop in shares after China published draft antitrust rules aimed at internet platforms. The proposed anti-monopoly rules could increase scrutiny on e-commerce marketplaces and payment services. The UK's economy has bounced back from recession with a record growth of 15.5% from July to September. The Office for the National Statistics said the country's economy is still 8.2% smaller than before the virus struck. The return to growth comes after a 6-month slump induced by the first coronavirus lockdown. Figures show the expansion was not enough to reverse the damage caused by the pandemic. A second lockdown began in England on 5th of November and is due to finish on December the 2nd. The economy will most likely shrink again in the final 3 months due to renewed lockdowns. Wall Street stocks fell at the open as the US coronavirus cases surged and investors weighed the timeline for mass rollout of an effective vaccine. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 are trading lower, about 0.5%. The Nasdaq Composite eked out a 0.1% gain. Oil prices held steady as traders tempered expectations of an early release of a COVID-19 vaccine. The International Energy Agency also raised doubts about a quick demand rebound amid surging infections in Europe and the US. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.